Welcome everyone to a new episode of the Conscious Action podcast. I am Brian Berneman, your host, and I have the pleasure for this episode to be joined by the founders of Fair and Good. First of all, thank you so much for being here, both of you. It's such a pleasure to be able to have you here to talk about this amazing thing that you're doing. Before we get into actually what Fair and Good is, before we get into what all of the things that all of the topics including ethics and ethical consumerism and all of the topics that we're going to get into, I wanted to get you to introduce yourself because I want to know who are you. So whichever of the two that wants to go first.
You want to go first, Mum? Okay, well, I'm Susan Maiava. I have been involved in development work for pretty much my whole life, really, since I was, when I was 24, I went to Samoa as a VSA volunteer, but I'd actually kind of known that I wanted to be in this field right from my teenage years. So I went to Samoa. I was a lecturer, a foundation lecturer actually at the National University of Samoa, and I taught biology at that time. I met my husband there, Sarah's father, in Samoa, and we got married in 1987. We both actually went to Reading University after that and studied there, doing our master's degree. I did my master's in rural development there, and our first son, Sarah's older brother, was born there in Reading. Came back to Samoa, and I taught at the University of the South Pacific at Alafor campus, and then came back to New Zealand when Sarah was born, and did my PhD at Massey University in development studies, and stayed there for quite a while as a lecturer, lecturing in development studies in all sorts of topics, development theory, practice, people-centered development, gender and development, sustainable development. Did a bit of curriculum development work, which I really enjoyed. And then after when I finished up there, I actually went into governance. So I've been on the boards of a number of charities, particularly the Leprosy Mission and the International Board of the Leprosy Mission. I did a lot of travel overseas with that in particular, going to places like Nepal, India, a couple of times, Thailand. I took Sarah with me a couple of times to India and Nepal. And so I've really been involved in governance since that time. I'm now on the board of Hagar, and I went to Vietnam just last year with them. So the whole theme of development is woven itself. I've done different things, but that's been the constant theme through my life. And then now, a couple of years ago, we started up the Fairfield conferences, which had the tagline "Social Justice Through Ethical Trade." So I've always had this has been running through my thinking as well for many years. And then I suppose with COVID and wanting to have a greater impact, then we developed Fair and Good.
Wow, so interesting. I love hearing everyone's stories because it gives me a glimpse of the journey that we all go through and understanding what we actually stand for and why we end up making the choices that we end up making. And Sarah, what about you?
Hello. Firstly, thanks for having us. Yes, I'm Sarah, so I am Susan's daughter. Grew up in Palmerston North. I'm half Samoan, half Pākehā, or Pālangi as we say in Samoan. And I guess my first dabble, I wouldn't say dabble, but introduction to this sort of world, or being more conscious of how other people live, well, very early on was like many Kiwi kids doing the 40-hour famine. I don't know if you... No, okay, so it's World Vision 40-hour famine, raising funds for people in poverty in developing countries. And then as a teenager, I sort of tagged along with my mum when she went on her leprosy mission trips. So I went to India and Nepal. I studied in Wellington. I actually did a BA in English. And then my first job out of university was up here in Auckland as a caption producer. So writing captions for deaf and hearing impaired viewers for different TV programs. And then after that, I was an arts intern, and so like sort of advocating for Pacific arts. And then I volunteered in Samoa for a bit in 2017 with a social enterprise called Women in Business. And now I am working for a TV show called Tangata Pacifica, so that's all about Pacific people, Pacific stories. So yeah, my background's really quite varied, but I would say a common thread is accessibility for people who might not have access to the same things that people in more privileged positions would have access to, and also giving a voice to those communities, whether it's like Pacific people or people with some sort of disability. So that's been.
Yeah, interesting. And like for me, this is very interesting because growing up in Argentina, I think that seeing how many like poor people were there, seeing a lot of the different communities, and me being part of a minority as well because of my family's religion, like it opened my eyes to things that perhaps not everyone gets to see. And when traveling for me was a big deal. Like it opened my eyes to a lot of injustices and a lot of things that I believe that is part of what we are here talking about, that is understanding that not everyone has the same, even like the level of survival is very different for a lot of people. And I wanted to talk a little bit about this in terms of what are the things that touches you to be able to say like, I actually have the fire inside of me to do this work.
I guess my background, I'm connecting with what you're saying because we come from a very privileged background, and somehow I had to deal with that. How is it that I can be privileged while other people don't have the things I have, don't have the opportunities that I have, can't get the education I have, even the nutrition, or the safety, or the rights, and I couldn't put these things together. It didn't make sense to me. I could never say that was okay. So yeah, I have seen tremendous poverty. I've seen exclusion and stigma, particularly with leprosy, where people are excluded from society, excluded from opportunities, excluded from education, excluded from participating in their community. I mean, actually ostracized. And I guess in a way, I don't know whether personally I'm trying to atone, perhaps, maybe I am, for my privilege. Sometimes I think I might be.
It's about levelling the playing field as well. Sometimes it's just luck, you know, what world you're born into. I think, that whole thing of leprosy for me was a wake-up call, because a lot of people, when we say, you know, when I say my mum's on the board of the leprosy mission, they're like, oh, does leprosy still exist? You know, so it's just being aware of our privilege and doing acts to kind of level that out.
Because there is an injustice there, because there's an unfairness there. It shouldn't be that way. It shouldn't be that way. And so, from my academic sort of perspective, the questions of why, what are the structural reasons why it is like that? And not just dealing with the superficial, not just being charitable, but actually looking at the underlying causes and structures.
Yes, definitely. And like what you're saying, like it resonates so much, because as well, even though from some perspectives I come from a minority, I know that I'm a male and I am mostly white. Like if someone sees me on the street, I have all of the privileges.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I talk a lot with some of the workshops that I do is understanding the balance of understanding our privilege, but not getting into guilt, so that it doesn't take us into despair or not doing anything. It's like, actually, how can I use my privilege to do something, to what you were saying, level the playing field? And actually, I love the idea, and I've seen this in some cartoons. I think that it's the difference between equality and having equity.
Yeah.
Yes.
Like, and how different that is, because I was born into this life and I have things differently than some others. So how do we get to a place where, is it fair for me to get the same as them or not?
Yeah.
And you're absolutely right. A lot of people don't understand the difference between equality and equity, and it really is about equity. It's about equality of opportunity, if you like, equality of access.
Yeah.
And that really is what equity is all about.
Yeah. And with your experience, both like traveling and meeting all of these people, what was the catalyst to say, okay, we're going to actually start Fair and Good? Like, how did that came about? Was that a thought that you already had, or was that a conversation? How did that happen?
I think it probably started with the conferences, would you
Yes.
say?
Yes. The Fairfield Trust ran the 2 Fairfield conferences, as I said, and that sort of, I guess, it has earlier roots in my own understanding of the structural causes, because for me, development work has never been about charity, but more about the structural causes, and writing those. And I became convinced. I can't really tell you how or why I did, but I became convinced that there's a connection between us in the West, the Western consumers, and those who produce our products, and that connection was an unjust one. That we were not paying fairly. We were not being fair in what we paid people to produce the products that we consume. And that rather than fixing the problem with charity, I mean, you could say, okay, well, let's only pay someone 50 cents for a t-shirt, but we'll be charitable and maybe give them a food program or something. Why not fix it at its cause and pay people fairly for their work? And then they would be able to buy the nutrition or the education or the opportunities that, like we do, just like we do. It was that switch, I guess, between charitable thinking and fixing the sort of the structure and fixing that connection, empowering. I mean, we have a thing about empowering not only the people that produce the products, but empowering the consumer. And by helping them understand that they have that connection with the people that produce their products, and they can make ethical choices. They can be empowered to make those better choices.
Yes, and this is something that with conscious action, this has been a core of what we do. That is understanding that we have all a responsibility, and we all have power.
Yes.
And when the majority of people that come to our events, like, we are consumers, and it's that understanding, that education, and that connection, making the connection, because I feel a lot of times that we are disconnected from that. It's the same with waste, the same with the food shortage. Like, when it's out of sight, it's out of mind, and it's getting people to understand we are all connected. And I think that this year with COVID and everything, this really showed a lot of that, how interconnected we are.
Absolutely.
And one of the things for me with that is taking responsibility, and I love what you're doing with Fair and Good, because this is actually having one of the topics that I say to people is having it conveniently.
Mm.
When it starts to be an inconvenience to do the right thing, and that is on the way, and that's going to not allow people to actually do the right thing. But when you actually want to buy, if you're trying to buy something now for Christmas or for the holidays, if you celebrate them and you give gifts, then it's like I have a place that I can go,
Absolutely.
and I'm sure that my values are going to be represented there.
Yeah, I mean, we live in such a fast-paced world, and I think every year we get into this rush of, I need to do this, I need to do that, and like, we are, I think, selfish creatures. We are, and so if we can make anything easier or take any shortcuts, we tend to do that as human beings. So, yeah, I mean, I think that's a big reason why we created this website, is that we've done all the guesswork. So it's all there. You can see the values, and you can feel assured that you are buying ethically without necessarily yourself having to go through each and every brand and go blah blah blah, so yeah, it's making it easier.
And I'm saying that, and like having an ethical marketplace like what you have with fair&good, so that people understand what does ethical mean and why would they choose. And because for me, like, and I love how you have it on the website, that it's the different values and different things that we can actually look into, how people are being paid, or the materials, or the entire supply chain, like all of these different aspects. Can you talk a little bit about that? What do you think that is ethical?
Well, I think we can think of ethical as being the really simple concept of doing the right thing. I think it actually starts with do no wrong. I like from the Hippocratic Oath, and when you do something ethical, you're not causing any damage, so you're doing no wrong. You're not harming the people, you're not harming the environment. So that's the very first step, if you want to think of it that way. The next step is then, doing the right thing. Treating your neighbours with love and dignity and respect, as you would treat yourself. So the golden rule there comes into it. It's actually really as simple as that. I mean, it really is.
Yeah.
But we have to think of our neighbours. They're not just around us in our street or the community where we live, but they are the people in the factories, in the plantations, on the farms, in the supply chain, and treating them with dignity and respect and fairness.
Yeah. And I do think that we are in a time in history now where doing no wrong is no longer what we need. We actually need to do the right thing. We need to do that which is actually going to restore and regenerate and actually give, as you were saying, give that leg up for people. And I find that this is very interesting, and going back to something that you mentioned before, that a lot of times I see big companies that they have some social aspect into it, and they give something to some community. And I have this split thought in my head that is, it's amazing that they are doing that, yet they are doing that because of doing something, taking advantage of other people. And this is the interesting thing about understanding connection as a global citizen and not just being connected with the people that are here, because these companies are taking advantage of people in India or Bangladesh or Vietnam or whichever country it is, and with the profit that they are making from that, then they're able to do some charitable work or supporting the community here. And I'm all of the time like, that's awesome, because those people also need it, yet they are having that money to give to that because of what they are doing abroad.
Yeah,
that's a tricky one.
that is a tricky one, and that's where transparency comes in. Making the supply chain, knowing the supply chain, investigating the supply chain, being willing to intervene into it, make changes, and making that all transparent for the consumer. So you're right, but then on the other hand, there are companies that are doing good things, and those companies are having an influence. So one of our very long-term goals is to make ethical mainstream, so to normalise it, so that when you go, so you don't even have to question, is this ethical or not, but in fact you can go into your supermarket or wherever and you will know that they stock ethical products.
Yeah.
So on our website we don't just have, we have a whole range of different brands, and we have a couple of really big ones. We have Kathmandu is probably our biggest, and they have a lot of companies now have a socially responsible corporate manager. They do and big annual reports. They audit right through their entire supply chain and so on. So we want to encourage that, obviously. We want consumers to expect that of the bigger companies as well as the little ones.
Yeah.
So we've got some big ones and middle-sized ones, and we've got little boutique ones and niche ones. But I guess the main message I'm saying is that ethical doesn't have to be niche or boutique.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I talk about this, and I think that I mentioned it on some of the previous episodes. That it's very interesting to see from a marketing perspective, when we go into a supermarket or when we go to a store, how what it is the right thing, what is fair, what is like fair trade, what is organic, actually needs to have that set there, and there's a surplus, it's expensive because there needs to be some certification or proving that. And one of the things that I was saying, imagine if we would go into a supermarket and the organic produce would be just like an orange and a carrot, and the other ones, the ones that say carrot or orange now, would say chemically grown orange or unfair, like,
unethical.
Yeah. And how for the consumer, and this is I think part of the education of the consumer, it's like the consumer now sees this is like a chocolate.
Yeah.
They don't see this is not a fair trade chocolate. And I think that from that perspective it makes it easier for people to be, what I would say a lot of times, either ignorant from a not knowing place, or even if they know, they bypass that to actually buy that other one because it's cheaper. And as you were saying before, like, we tend to do the choices that actually are convenient for us. And sometimes we don't think like, wait, if this is actually like $1, who didn't get paid?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So when something is produced, if you don't pay the fair price for it, someone else is paying. And they're paying physically with long working hours or unsafe conditions or low pay or whatever. What you're talking about, Brian, in the supermarket there, that's a wonderful aspirational goal to work for. We're not quite there yet, I'm afraid, and there's quite a lot of work to do. And you're right about educating consumers. I think consumers really need to understand the influence that they can have, the power that they can have through their purchasing power.
Yeah.
And so we're kind of wanting to work towards that tipping point where brands will go, the demand from consumers is changing. The demand is now, because so many people are realising the power they have in their spending, the demand is changing. We, the brands, must now stock as normal those ethical products and become normal.
And I think it's important as well that it's not a greenwashing thing, or not something that's like, we're sustainable because it's a trend. It's not about being a trend, it's like the bottom line. So
And from that, because you mentioned before, in a sense, you are doing the work for people so that they don't have to. How was that process? Like, because I know for me, like, when I talk to some of the brands or I ask, like, are you looking at reports, or how is that happening?
So we put out an initial survey and then a second survey asking brands for information around their supply chains, how they're working towards ensuring that their workers are paid fairly, you can probably speak a little bit more on that.
They're different values, their
Yeah.
treatment of women, what their values are. So we also look for certifications. I guess we had to be somewhat flexible because we've got really big brands, we've got really tiny brands.
Yeah.
The big ones, we're looking for certifications like Fair Trade, GOTS Cotton. We're looking for maybe some of them will be B Corp certified. Certifications are good. And some of them are simply companies that want to be ethical and do the right thing, and so they're using fair trade ingredients, as I said, or GOTS cotton or whatever in there. The smaller they get, the shorter their supply chain is generally. Some of them are working directly with communities in Cambodia or India or somewhere like that. So some of the smaller ones like, for example, I think Recreate, or Tonic and Cloth, Holly Bolly, they have actually their own sewing studios or whatever in a country like India or wherever, and they work directly with the women, mostly women, who do the sewing, and often part of their motivation will be giving opportunities to marginalised women. So they have a sort of, we get to know these smaller ones. They might not have certifications, but we get to know their stories, and they're completely open about their supply chains, and we can see that they're working directly with the workers and for a good cause. So there's all that range in the middle. So we have to be a bit flexible, but we are very conscious of the fact that we want to be sure, and so that the people who visit our site can trust the information that's on the site.
Yeah, and that I think that it's so important. One is having all of the different values, because people care about different things.
Yes.
And understanding, I've talked a lot with Chris Morrison from Karma Drinks and All Good, and especially like during our podcast episode, and talking about that, that connection of going and seeing the growers, and they are a big enough company that they do have some certifications, but as well, like it's tough. And I've talked to a lot of times to We Are, like the clothing company, and it's the same. It's like, like they know everyone that they are working with.
Absolutely.
And sometimes the smaller companies, they don't have access to all of those certifications. They don't have access to
it's an expensive process for people as well.
And I think that this is something that consumers also don't understand.
That's right.
For a brand to actually have like all of these certifications, then they need to put that into the price of their products, which then ends up being more expensive. And one of the things from this is like understanding, if I buy a t-shirt and it's $70, whereas another t-shirt can be $5, understanding, why is there a difference, and voting with your dollar, voting with what you know, and voting with your values as well, to be able to do that from a perspective of doing the right thing for you and doing the right thing for others.
Yes, exactly.
There's a reason why it might sometimes have a higher price, but that is somewhat offset by the fact that you're getting a higher quality good that's not going to fall apart the next week. So it kind of balances out in that sense. And a lot of the time, ethical products aren't necessarily that much more expensive.
Not necessarily. And one of the reasons is quite often the shortening of the supply chain. So instead of going through the agent, the first tier, the second tier, the third tier, a lot of the brands work directly with communities, so that you take out the middleman, and so there's a level of price that's taken out. So it's not necessarily more expensive. People maybe assume that, but it's not. And as Sarah said, you're getting much better quality.
Yes.
And equally so, when we think of high fashion brands where the prices are even higher, that doesn't necessarily mean ethical as well. So I think when you're looking for ethical products, looking at price is not necessarily the clearest indication.
That's right,
What are, for people that haven't been yet on the website, what are the different things that they can buy or they can purchase through there? Like, what are the things that, if they want to buy something, what are they going to see there?
So there's 4 categories. There's fashion, food, home and living, and what's the other one?
Got me there.
Fashion, food, home and living. It's basically across the board.
Okay.
So
I'm trying to think. I know.
It will come.
Oh, beauty.
Beauty.
Yeah,
Body-
that one we're trying to
body
grow a
and
bit
beauty.
more. But I would say, yeah, fashion, food, home and living, the main ones, and then beauty is another one. So yeah, all of the brands on the website Fair and Good have a Kiwi connection and have a social justice connection. So in terms of going back to our values, our core value is fair labour. So every single brand on that site will meet that value. And then there's 7 others on top of that. So there's inclusiveness, gender equality, giving back, community, transparency, consistency, and eco-consciousness. So you'll find Kiwi brands across the board that meet those values.
So we're not expecting everybody to have all 8 brands. I would say we'd expect them to have at least 4, with fair labour being the main one. But they may specialise, and they may say, okay, we're specialising in gender.
Yeah.
Or we might be a social enterprise, so our main focus is giving back. Like we have a wine brand on there, 27 Seconds, and all their profits go to Hagar. So yeah, there's a lot of crossover, I'd say, between the values, but fair labour is definitely.
Yeah. And for fair and good, what this comes from your passion.
Yes.
You're not being paid.
No. And I'll just point out too that there's no strings attached. So sometimes people ask, how are we being funded? Are we being funded by the brands? No. We don't sell. We don't take a cut from the brands. We don't take any commission or charge a fee or anything. It's completely free for the brands. And you might
completely free for the consumer. So
for the consumer. So it's supported by a trust, a private family trust, the Fairfield Trust, and it does make brands a little bit suspicious. When we were setting up, it's quite and we were saying, we're setting up the site. Can you give us information? Would you like to be on the site? And they were like, okay, so what's the catch? And we're going, there's no catch. There's no strings attached. But the reason for that is because you might say, well, we're favouring the brands. We're not favouring the brands so much as the producers. We are a channel through to the brands, and the brands are a channel through to the producers, the makers, the creators, the growers. That's who we really care about.
But of course, it's sort of like a win-win, because we still want to support these Kiwi brands, and I think there's a real focus at the moment, especially with COVID, and supporting local. And so it's like you kind of get 2 birds with 1 stone. You're supporting local, but you're also supporting people in those developing countries who are completely affected by COVID. I mean, in terms of, say, for example, the Tier Fund Ethical Fashion Report that came out recently showed that 1 million workers in Bangladesh lost their jobs just in April alone this year. So we're thinking locally and we're thinking internationally, with the main goal of social justice, particularly in the developing world.
Yeah, and I do think actually that sometimes it's tricky when you're trying to do the right thing and people are like, what's the catch there? But as well, it's so important to showcase those that are doing the right thing, and especially those that are going above and beyond what they need to do. Like going back to what you were saying before, like do no harm and then do the right thing, and then it's like going above and beyond of what we can actually do to create the change, because it's so important to get people to know these brands are doing the right thing, and I love celebrating and showcasing.
Well, exactly, and that's what we love too. I mean, some of our brands have the most incredible stories. I mean, I'm just in awe of our brands actually, particularly New Zealanders that have some of them have gone on a holiday somewhere, seen something which has just like changed their life, and they've said, I can do something about this. I can come in here and make a difference. and it's just mind-blowing. And those stories, when you click on the brands on our site, you can find those stories. Some of them have links even to documentaries. You were mentioning the Karma the Lucy Foundation also. So we give you lots of really good information there. You can click through and find really, really interesting and just incredible stories that will really inspire you.
And I think the exciting thing about this is that this is just the start. So we've got these amazing brands on our site. There's about 32 of them. We've already got plans to add some more in the new year, and we just want, like, if brands are meeting these values, we want them to come on board. Like, we just want to grow it and grow it and grow it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think again, like, this is so important work. Like, I think that a lot of times we take for granted, or at least I know, I live in a little bit of a bubble, and this is not a COVID bubble. This is an actual bubble of being surrounded by people that are into the environment, into well-being, into ethical practices, and I sometimes forget until I run a workshop, and then people start asking me all of these questions that for me are so sometimes basic, and I understand, like, actually it's not basic. A lot of people don't know some of these things. A lot of people don't know, where do I go to check for this? And it's like, well, now you can come here and check it out.
Well, you can be a great ambassador for us.
I'd love to. And I love, actually, like, for the ones that are listening to this and are not seeing it on the video, like, there's some really nice cards, and I hope that we can actually take some photos with that, and we'll share it on our social, that are really saying the messages of what you're trying to do, and especially around this time, around Christmas, that it's really important that we understand if you actually have purchasing power, you can actually make the right choice and actually help someone.
Yes. And I think Christmas is a great time, a great place to start. In fact, but making a resolution, if you like, to that all your Christmas presents for all your family and your loved ones are ethical this year, that is a fantastic place to start. And the other thing I would say to people is, sometimes it can be overwhelming. You think, oh my goodness, the problem is too big, what can I do? My advice really is just start. Just start, just do one thing. Just when you go to the supermarket, buy fair trade bananas.
Totally. It's just little steps, and it's not like we're perfect, but any steps you can take are better than that. It's better than nothing.
Yeah, and that is, like, with conscious action, that is what we always say to everyone, is what is your next action? Now that you know this, what is your next action? Like, don't think about the 20 different actions that you can take. What is just the next one? And being, like, for me, being kind to oneself, because we are not perfect and we cannot do everything, and being kind with others. And when we are kind with others, then we might be able to do the right choice. So I know that we could be talking about this for hours, but I'm just going to go into the last few questions, and some of them I think that you have already answered. But besides Fair and Good, what is one resource that you would recommend for people? That can be a website, a podcast, a documentary.
I think your listeners are probably quite well tuned into a lot of things anyway, but for anyone who hasn't watched it, The True Cost is probably like a must watch.
Actually, I would actually really agree with that. There are some fabulous, really eye-opening documentaries, and maybe if your listeners haven't travelled a lot and don't necessarily feel that connection outside of New Zealand or haven't experienced that, probably some really good documentaries to watch there, and The True Cost is a great one.
Yeah, The True Cost, like we showed it last year during the Fashion Revolution Week. And it's such a good one, because I do think that, as you're talking about, like, ethical and all of these brands, like, the brands that are not doing this, we are not paying the true cost. Someone else is paying that. Watching these documentaries, I think that it really touches people and it opens people's eyes. It's not always easy to see that.
I've seen people cry watching it.
but sometimes the reality, we need to be aware of what's happening. So again, like being kind with oneself and being sure that we can do that. What is one tip that you would share with people about ethical practices or ethical living or purchasing?
I think, apart from using fair and good, if you're going into a shop and you're not quite sure where something's made or how it's made, or you're just a bit confused about anything, just ask. Just ask the shopkeeper for more information on a product. All you can do is really just ask and do a Google if you can. Like, try and keep informed as much as you can.
I'm sorry, but I'm just going to say visit Fair and Good. That's fairandgood.co.nz. That's my tip.
Nice. Changing a little bit from a completely personal standpoint, what is your latest small act of kindness? Something that you have done in the last few days. And sometimes it's hard to see when we are being kind and we do those things, but I had like in one of the episodes someone said like, actually I don't see it that way, like everything that I do.
I actually do agree with that. Like, I don't think there's like, okay, today I'm going to do this act of kindness. I feel like it's just a way of living, and if you just treat people how you want to be treated, I feel like you're doing pretty well.
I guess I agree with Sarah. Really, it's about integrity in your life, that you practice what you believe, you practice your values, and they become embedded and ingrained in you. I hope that I'm kind most of the majority of the time.
I liked what you said before as well, that kindness is also within. So just thinking about this time of year and thinking about 2020, being kind to yourself as well. Like, take the time if you need to try not to overthink everything, or think, oh, I should be doing this, should be doing that. Go, actually, I'm doing pretty well.
And this has been for a lot of people really challenging, and some people super challenging, some people a little bit challenging. We all had different experiences, and I do, because a lot of the work that we do is about well-being and about staying well and understanding that giving yourself the time and the space to be with yourself and to be a little bit more relaxed and to be okay with where you are, and to understand that we are not perfect, but having compassion as well. So that's perfectly good. And last question is, what is the one thing that you wish everyone in the world knew? Which is a big one.
For me, I suppose it does go back to that idea of like, everything that you do does matter. Every little act that you do does make a difference, because I think we can get quite overwhelmed that we're just a little speck in this whole world and universe, and maybe what we do doesn't matter, but it does, and people are watching. Whether your acts are seen or not, it does matter.
I think I agree with that.
Wonderful. And to end, where can people find you on social or the website once again?
So we're on Instagram and Facebook, and our handle is fair and good. That's FAIR and good. And our website is fairandgood.co.nz.
Wonderful.
And you have to spell the and. A-N-D.
Cool. Wonderful. Thank you so much for being here, for taking the time, and for what you're doing. Like, it's wonderful to see a marketplace that actually touches on all of these different values that I'm really excited about, because it is something that it's going to make people's choices easier. So if you're listening to this episode and you still haven't purchased your Christmas gift and you're going to, go to Fair and Good, check it out, and support the brands that are doing the right thing for everyone in the world, or supporting at least some people in the world, and are not creating more of the issues that we have in the world now. So thank you once again for being here. Thank you for everyone listening, and we will see you on the next episode. Bye.
Thank you very much, Brian. We really appreciate you having us along.